Welcome to the Pilgrim Litigation Nation with Daniel Hutton.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Pilgrim Litigation Nation with Daniel Hutton. I'm Matt Skye. Daniel is a skilled attorney based in Stoughton, Massachusetts, specializing in personal injury, auto accident law, criminal law, and animal bite law, as well as civil rights. Daniel is here to share his expertise and insights into these critical areas. Daniel, thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for having me today.
So, Daniel, let's jump in. Can you share us what initially inspired you to pursue a career in personal injury law?
Yes, strangely enough, you would be amazed how much as a child you're already on the right path, things that you love. And I loved show and tell. So obviously as a trial attorney, that's what you're doing. So in some ways you could say I never grew up. But on top of that, it was really a love for helping people. The first time I went to court, I was actually an undergraduate. I had a roommate from China that had just obtained a car, had just come over from communist China a day earlier, got a learner's permit. He stopped about 10 feet before the intersection. The police thought he was driving intoxicated. He was not. In fact, he was just learning to drive the car. This was his first motor vehicle experience. And so he got to go to court. And he argued with the judge, I don't need a driver's license. I only need a learner's permit because I'm learning. And so from that experience, I realized with my friend he was in trouble, and I did my best to help them. But as a result of that, I realized that I truly did enjoy helping people. And so I really matriculated towards that area. Family members would push me. They would see the skills and the personality. But in the end, it was the love of doing what I do, helping people.
Maybe let's touch on that a little more, the idea of helping people. Is there one aspect that fulfills you most when you finish through a case or when you're in the middle of helping someone through a difficult legal time?
Yes. It's knowing that I did the best job I could and I really made a difference in their life. And there's a reward in that. And it's not the money. It's really knowing that you did well.
What kinds of cases stand out to you? Obviously, as a personal injury lawyer, you see people in the thick of many different types of situations.
Right. If you're asking me for individual cases, one that stands out to me is one that I probably settled in the last year. And this was a slip and fall case. And everybody takes slip and fall as probably a fraudulent claim. They say everybody should be able to get up. Nobody takes it seriously. And there were some problems with this case. I'm not going to lie. And my client was elderly. But what most people didn't know is she was going to settle as quickly as she could because she had a very severe case of cancer. And because she had very little money, she was not well off, I was in a situation where I wanted to do best for her. But at the same time, I had the pressure. If I settled quickly, she wasn't going to get what she needed. You see, my client did not have a motor vehicle, and she was not able to drive back and forth to the hospital on a regular basis so that she could have treatment for the cancer. It was just very difficult. So I had to settle the case so that I had enough money so she could buy a car, a decent car. And so that took a little bit of time, but I was very fortunate. And I was fortunate because I had relationships with other attorneys, and the attorney on the other side I knew quite well. Now, obviously, I didn't tell him the situation of my client because I didn't want to give him leverage in the negotiation. Negotiation is very important. You have to come from a position of strength. But you also have to do what the client needs, and sometimes they're contradictory. But we were able at the last minute to resolve this case, and my client happily was able to afford a car, and now she's able to see medical doctors as she needs.
Can you speak to that a little more, this idea that when you have a client, you're really not just getting a financial reward, like you mentioned, but you're really helping someone with their entire life, putting their life back together.
Yes, and to put it bluntly, you can't walk away with doing this line of work effectively without having some spiritual value underneath. And as it was explained to me at one time, there was only 3 professions, and it was doctors, lawyers, and priests, because this was a Catholic tradition. And it had to do is professing your faith. That's why it's called professions. And it had to do on top of that with helping people. One, you help the body of the person as the doctor. One, you help the soul of the person as they go through the difficulties of life like the priest. And one is the lawyer who pretty much finishes everything else. It looks out for the financial well-being for people, looks out that they're not taken advantage of because some people have more knowledge and they know how to take advantage of other people. So at times as a lawyer, oddly enough, you're like a protector, almost a knight errant, because you are fighting in such a way that you want to be honest and ethical to the other side, but at the same time, you want to get the best result for your client.
And how do you balance that process? Because like you're saying, you want to be ethical to the other side, although when you're representing someone, you have to be in their corner, you have to be their pit bull, so to speak.
At times it can be difficult. One of the areas that we are experiencing as attorneys right now, and I'm sure it's always been that way, has been fraud. And as an attorney, you understand you don't represent one client, you represent many clients. And if you do something unethically and a judge figures that out, you've not just hurt your case and your reputation, but in front of that judge, you have managed to hurt all your future clients. So you have to have that balance where you look out for everybody and not just one case. And I understand this business at times is ego-driven, where you cannot suffer a loss. Nobody wants to lose. But you also have to take a long-term perspective. And I have to say that is probably one of the most difficult parts of being a good lawyer, because sometimes it's a judgment call and you assume that you know everything. But on the other hand, being fair to other attorneys when you're negotiating, they understand that you're a decent sort and they're willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. And the one experience I can remember is when I was a young attorney. The attorney on the other side I knew well. And we were in the judge's chambers. And it was a 50-50 case because it could have gone either way. And that attorney, who was a friend of mine, said, "You know what, Dan, if you tell me that it happened the way you said, I'll settle the case right now. That'll be that." And the judge was like smiling. He knew he didn't have to do a trial. Life was going to go be wonderful. And I said, "I'm sorry, Mo. I wasn't there. I can't make you that promise." The judge groaned. We had the trial. Unfortunately, my side won. Oddly enough, my friend went back to the law office and gave me high reviews, and that carried on.
It's interesting. So I guess really building that reputation of honesty and legitimacy, commitment to your clients, commitment to what's right, that seems to give you a certain leverage when you actually do present cases or try to settle. Am I correct?
Oh,
right?
Definitely. And, when you're older like I am, you're not young, you actually do have relationships and you have experience. And people know if you're a straight shooter or if you're somebody that's disingenuous. And I would also say, on a subtle note, manners. Manners are very important. There are some attorneys that will lose their temper, scream, and yell. And it ultimately hurts your client, because at the end of the day, when that adjuster has a choice between calling you or some other case, they, in the back of their mind, are human and they will respond. Do I want to call up the person that's nice and friendly, or do I want to leave in a bad day because I know I'm going to be yelled at? And that too is effective if you treat people well. You are helping your clients.
How often this is an interesting thing you talk about, and I don't hear it that often. How often do cases kind of end up in that right on the line where the law and maybe external factors like personality and approach are more pivotal to the outcome than we think?
It's a case-by-case situation. I can tell you there was one case I had where I knew the attorney very, very well, and I'm saying about 18 years. And it was a case that was very complicated because it involved the federal government, where they had liens. So even if I settled the case, the federal government was going to want to be reimbursed. And so when you have, let's say, hypothetically, $100,000 settlement, and the government have liens that are like $200,000, well, they want to be reimbursed under the law. They have a right. Well, if you settle that way, the problem is the government, in theory, could claim everything. You have to be very careful when you're dealing with liens. And one of the things I did was, because I was able to separate state from federal law, is I got a state judgment with a state order with regards to protecting attorney fees and costs and everything else, so that my client had more protection. In the end, what was so critical was the attorney on the other side for the insurance company convinced his client to offer me the maximum of the coverage, and let's say it's $100,000. And then that attorney went out of his way and spoke to the judge about all the work I had done, so that my attorney fees and costs of the client, etc., would be protected by the judge through a judicial order. So you would be surprised how those basic things, those friendships come around and protect you in the long run, which means really your clients are being protected.
We just touched on this a little bit, but maybe if we can explore a bit more of your approach to advocating for clients and ensuring that they get the compensation they deserve. What does that look like?
Well, that's an interesting word, because deserve doesn't necessarily mean the best result, because at times I have clients that are involved in fraud. And if I have a case like that, I do try to get off of that case because I don't want the danger of hurting my other clients. But with regards to getting what they deserve, it's different than me getting them the most that I can. And under attorney ethics, I have to go for the most that I can. And if the insurance company wants to give me that, I will gladly take it. As somebody else might say, a fair market value is less, but I'm going to go for everything that I can because, in my opinion, my client deserves the best, somebody that's going to go toe-to-toe for the other side to give it their all. You can't telephone it in. You have to give them maximum success. And it's really at times arbitrary what different people think a case is worth. And when you evaluate a case, it's not just when you calculate the damages, that is physical, personal injury, and the medical bills. Sometimes you have to look at it from a business perspective. And the things they teach you in law school at times will really hurt you because they don't teach you business. And I had a fantastic mentor in business. He was from New York City, so he was not a soft little kitten. He knew how to really swing the elbows to get the maximum. And he would explain to me, you want to fight for every case. And it's not a bad thing to file a lawsuit because from their perspective over the insurance company, what you have is not a legal decision, but a business decision. And they know if you file the lawsuit, they're looking at attorney fees that if they didn't have to deal with a lawsuit, the case would be worth less because they wouldn't be incurring the attorney costs for their own side. So you have to make a decision to take it the next level and file the lawsuit so that you can potentially get leverage in negotiation so that the other side will pay more because they understand business-wise it makes sense to settle.
And what happens when we see these massive payouts? Is that usually just a business decision too in that regard?
Well, to tell you, the massive payouts, sometimes it's a runaway jury. You never know what's going to happen, right? And that's a luck thing because a different jury can come up with a different result. And there have been times I have shook my head and asked myself, how could they offer so little at the jury decision? On the other hand, they have turned around in the past and given me offers, or I should say judgments, where I was amazed at what we received. Now, as for the massive payouts, you read about them, but they're not that often every day. You might have a massive payout, but you might have a litigation that takes 3 or 4 years on a case like that. I had a friend just recently, was in Lawyers Weekly this week, where he won a lawsuit over who inherited a Greek island, okay? But that happens few and far between, and I just want to say he did a fantastic job, all right? But most cases, I would say, unless there's like a death or so forth, there's pretty much a spectrum of what the case is worth. And decent cases generally are settled before they go to trial because the insurance companies don't want to assume the risk where they're subjected to triple damages and attorney fees if you file an unfair and deceptive business practice claim, like in Massachusetts 93A.
So what strategies do you use to build rapport and trust with your clients, particularly when they're going through difficult time?
Well, it depends on the client. Let's face it, personalities are different. And one person might really need to emotionally call up and have their hand held. In other cases, the people are experienced, they're older, and they tell me, just do what you got to do. I trust you, all right? There are cases, however, when you go through them, they really do break your heart. And those you sit there and probably on your own give a little bit extra because the facts of the case are so bad. And you know that even if you do get the money, fair money, that it's never going to make that person whole again.
What would you say, zooming out a little bit, what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a personal injury lawyer?
Biggest challenges, those different with regards to each case. To generalize it, the most important thing, in my opinion, in the beginning is to really take your time and get all the evidence. And when I say evidence, that's very different than what the client tells you, because you get to that point where the clients like to tell you all the things that make them look nice and wonderful. And they leave out the facts that, well, let's just say they're not so perfect. And understandably, humans are not perfect, but it takes a little bit of time to get people to tell you the truth. And you know that these are not the answers that you want, but you have to have them. And in order to get them, you do have to establish a rapport and a truth so that they understand that you're there to help them. You're not there to throw them under the roof, and you will still do the best job.
Why do you think people are so reluctant to give the full story sometimes?
There was a case I had, and unfortunately, the young man overdosed in a halfway house. And family members were involved, and they knew things and didn't tell everybody everything. And by not telling everybody everything, I would say the halfway house was denied some of the knowledge of what was going on, so they weren't able to intervene in a timely fashion. And in that situation, you had people feeling guilty, terrible. And it was that pretty much, I could have done better. I could have done things differently. And, when you have that type of loss, there's nothing you can do to change it. What you can do is take the time to tell people that they made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. They did the best that they could under the circumstances, maybe didn't understand everything. And in the end, they have to give themselves some forgiveness, because the person that passed wouldn't want them to be so miserable.
It's powerful stuff. As we wrap up, if you had one major takeaway for people listening to this today, what would that be?
With regards to lawsuits, call up an attorney at the beginning. Don't listen to family members that give you bad advice, because you would be shocked how much bad advice people take and really jeopardize their case because they trust somebody. And they have every reason to trust that family member, but that family member is not an experienced attorney, and as a result, they can hurt you. Listen to an attorney that will step back and give you advice that you and your family member probably did not think of.
I think that's a great point to wrap up on. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Pilgrim Litigation Nation with Daniel Hutton. For more information or to connect with Daniel, visit dhuttonlaw.com. Daniel, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and comment below.